This podcast is brought to you by Filmora 14. Support Moore's Laws by downloading Filmora 14 for free through the link in the description. And then it is also brought to you by cdkeyoffer.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software. We'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined, as often happens, but not constantly anymore, as there seems to be a fairly large pantheon of super best friends that relatively often come back on the show. But, it's still very important, I think, to get outside perspectives. I actually think talking to new people every other week, which is why I do that, or started doing that with Broken Silicon. It's like one important thing that can be done so you don't, like, your opinions don't rot. Because if, like, you just talk to yourself or to the same person every week, eventually you will get these blind spots where, like, oh, I've been wrong about this for 2 months, but I just haven't talked to anyone about this. And so I really appreciate Manuel, I hope I'm saying that right, coming on the show. Yeah. And please introduce yourself, as anonymous or unanonymous as you want to be, assuming you're okay with people knowing your first name, because I just said it. But
yeah, sure. It's okay.
Who are you? What do you do? And what got you into doing what you do?
Yeah, well, hi, my name's Manuel, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored, flattered, and humbled to be here. I am 41 years old from Germany, and I run the YouTube channel Hubwood, where I mainly review laptops, gaming laptops. I focus a bit on integrated GPUs as well. I started doing that around 2017, when I actually had a pretty weak gaming laptop that I just bought for playing The Witcher 3 on vacation on a camper van trip, because I wanted to be able to do that because I thought that would be cool. So I started to look up videos on YouTube that showed me which cheap GPUs on laptops would be able to do that. And that was such a help to me that I bought that laptop and it worked. And I decided, well, I could help people too by just testing that laptop with other games. So I made my first video, which kind of picked up pretty well. And so slowly over a few weeks, I started doing some other videos. And then I've decided, well, in YouTube, there's a blind spot for comparing laptop GPUs back then. Like in 2017, almost nobody compared laptop GPUs. Maybe the reason is because it's kind of hard to do that, because it's not always exact, because you never have
it's not like just swapping it out in the same motherboard. Yeah. You've got to have full systems you test against each other.
Yeah, and they're never perfect, because the laptops never are identical except for the GPU, or at least in most cases. It's pretty hard to get laptops that are identical besides the GPU.
Unless you have a ton of money,
Yeah,
just buy all of these laptops that are from the same brand. Yeah.
So I started doing that, and because nobody did it, and that worked pretty well. Like comparing 960M to 1050M, that picked up pretty well. And so I thought, wait, I want to do that. I want to help people making decisions on what they can see in benchmarks. Most channels do. They just show you graphs. And the thing is, I prefer doing gameplay footage, and I know that there are a lot of channels out there that are faking these gameplay footages. It's kind of a tough market to go into, because you never know if it's fake or if it's not fake. But I thought I also added some reviews showing the people that I actually have these laptops, just do some voiceover in more and more videos lately, just to prove that I actually use these laptops. And it's not just a fake video just testing a GPU and slapping an OSD over it. And when I did that, I decided at some point, well, if I have the laptops to do these benchmarks, I can also, review them if I have them anyway. And so the frequency in which I published videos just I just published more and more videos over time. I'm still doing this as a side job. It's not my main job. I still have a full-time office job, 2 little kids. So it's like all my free time actually right now is spent on the channel. So, and well, that's where I am right now. I'm doing the best I can, doing as much as I can. Yeah.
Well, and that's why, and I've seen some of your work. It's pretty good. I'd recommend everyone listening right now subscribe to Hubwood, which is in the description as well for everybody who can find that. But it's funny, one of my early YouTube videos came from a similar place as what you described. Actually, to this day, I'm looking at it now. It's got 84,000 views, which isn't, I guess, crazy compared to recent videos I've done. But I will say that was in July of 2019. I had just started making videos really like a few I think Broken Silicon had started a month before that.
Mhm.
um and that got, of course, like 5,000 views because I just started my channel. And that just goes to show you, like, every month, or like, I'll get at least one comment on YouTube that's like, thanks for this MX250 overclocking guide, because no one else paid it.
Yeah.
Even that's a very popular small graphics card back then. A lot of
Yeah.
people, well, I just said they still comment on it, still use it. And the 10-watt variants always fascinated me because it's like a 10-watt GPU. As long as you limit the frequency to, like, back then for these ones, like 800 to 900 megahertz, you could get performance that in the laptops of the time was just absolutely
Yeah.
crazy. But if you did
Yeah.
not limit the frequency, I distinctly remember this in Battlefield 1, it'll go from like 1500 megahertz to 800 back and forth, and your frame rate will go from like 20 to 60 over
Okay.
and over and over. And that was one of those things of like, I cannot believe how many people have this laptop GPU and no one is putting out a video that tells you how to solve a problem they all have. And I think that's getting better now, but I still think it's pretty rare to have really good laptop tests, like maybe that you do, or I would say the Fox does, or Jared's Tech does.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, again, as I said, I think it's because it's tougher to benchmark laptops because of the circumstances around them. You know, like this, uh, uh, like for example, an RTX 4050 laptop.
Mm.
If you compare 2 or 3 or 4 of them, they'll get you different results every time because of the rest of the system.
Yeah.
So I think that's hindering people to do laptop tests sometimes.
Yeah, I was thinking of this too just now. Like, I don't know how you get to be as big of a benchmark reviewer as like Gamers Nexus or Hardware Unboxed when they're so entrenched, and that's why people trust them. They've been doing this long enough that they have credibility. There's so many fake testers out there. Like, I think
Yeah.
I am lucky in that a lot of my stuff is either leaks or opinion pieces. And because of that, I've established credibility through like people agreeing with me or not agreeing with me, at least finding what I said interesting enough to comment, whether it's positive or not. And that means when I do a review and I do show on-screen gameplay with like frame rates and stuff, I do it so infrequently that there's no reason not to believe me. Like, why would I fake this now?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
I make less money from reviews. Frankly just do it sometimes because I feel like I have to make sure I remember how to. But I yeah, I don't. It's tricky though. But it's, and I don't know how. I guess I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, because I do think, like, especially with the reviews I've done, the best points that I made during the reviews are like an example that comes to mind. In 2021, I was testing an RTX 3070 Founders Edition, and I went from a Radeon 7 to that. And I was like, as you can see, this is like on average 30% faster than a Radeon 7 or something. Having said that, though, there are games from like 3 years before the 3070 even launched that I was playing where, like, even in 1440p, sometimes it would run out of VRAM. And like actually
Mm,
showing like Resident Evil 2, like, I'm like, here I am walking, and boom, now it's getting 40 frames a second out of nowhere, and I have to lower settings. I know it's stronger than the Radeon 7, but the Radeon 7 was maxing out my display with higher settings. So it
yeah.
feels worse. That's a much more important point than like, this is 10% faster. And I don't know how but yet people just want to see the average graph. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do, because that's also why I chose to show gameplay, because I always also add the frame time graph, which I I'm addicted to frame time graph right now. It's like it's a curse and it's a blessing at the same time, because once you're fixated on that, you start seeing stuttering everywhere, and just showing the graphs is not really showing you how the game actually behaves. You know what I mean? And something like VRAM being too small, it's kind of hard to show that in graphs unless it's really the frame rate really breaks down and it's just not enough. So that's another reason for like why I show gameplay footage.
Yeah, and but it's never just one thing. I think it's important to have it all right. Like, here's the average frame rates, here's the frame time graph, but even that frame time graph might ignore actually watching the cards running next to each other. It really has to take all of
Yeah.
that into consideration. And I don't know. It just, on the one hand, I think it makes it easier for the people that put in the work to distinguish themselves. On the other hand, it makes it harder because you have to. Because
Yeah.
so let me get to the first subject though. Let's see. Yeah, I wanted to start with graphics cards just because it is all anyone wants to talk about right now, and a bunch have been announced and are
Sure.
launching. I mean, this week, allegedly, the 5070 will be launching. I still hear pretty crazy things about if it's even ready to launch to this day on Sunday before it launches. But how do you feel about how Blackwell has turned out so far?
To be honest, pretty terrible, for multiple reasons. First being is the price that we are facing right now, of course, because of the shortage. If they made it on purpose or not, I don't care. It's just terrible, especially over here in Europe, like adding the tariffs and the taxes and then putting a premium price on everything. Like you cannot get cheap GPUs in Europe right now. I think it's the same in the US, which is once again caused by a Nvidia launch. The second thing is I was pretty disappointed with the efficiency of these
Yeah.
cards. I'm a sucker for efficiency. I refuse to put in GPUs. That's just my personal opinion, but I refuse to put in GPUs into my PC that use like a lot more than 200 or 250 watts. So I currently use a 4070, and I was thinking about getting a 5070 if it would be more efficient, but obviously it's
Not
not.
appreciably.
It's just it's just buying more performance with more wattage. So it's not really that interesting to me, and to be honest, I might skip Blackwell altogether because of that.
Yeah, I mean, just to really hammer home how bad and like the shortages are and like why they're so bad. I mean, I've been covering and leaking information about these launches for years now, but I would say about a year ago, I mean, and it's not just me. I mean, you can see like leaked presentations in Taiwan in a boardroom where they're like showing 5090 on the chart, like AIBs have been briefed. NVIDIA's partners have been briefed by NVIDIA for about a year now, and they've been just thrown all over the place. They genuinely were told the 5090 was going to launch summer last year, and then it didn't. And then it was the 5080, and then that didn't. And then now it's quarter 4, now it's quarter 1. And so what we have here is companies, and I don't mean to defend AIBs too much, but I do know a lot of anger is going to probably bubble up when they see. I mean, there are people are already mad at what that the 5070 Ti is really like $1,000, and I'm sure people will be mad when they find out that. I mean, I don't have the numbers next to me, but I'm sure a lot of 9070 XTs will be like $700. Um, but these AIBs were told that these cards were going to launch, especially from Nvidia, late last year, and then they stopped making Lovelace. And then AIBs were like, okay, so we'll just buy up a lot of 5080s. And then there was a rug pull. I mean, Nvidia said they'd get these products. They didn't get them, and now they're not giving them Blackwell. And I've had talks with AIBs that said I won't say which ones, that said they're worried they're going to go out of business. Like they said, this is our profit to
Okay.
earnings ratio. This is how many cards we expected to sell. They're like, you don't have any Lovelace or Blackwell. And then Nvidia's like, good luck. And it's like, yeah, but you understand we're not going to. So these shortages are especially bad because Nvidia told them they would have Blackwell, and they never gave it to the AIBs. And now there's no Blackwell or
Yeah.
Lovelace.
Okay.
It's just terrible.
That's true. That's pretty. I mean, the AIBs just they they have to work with what they get from Nvidia, and canceling the 4000 series and not providing 5000 series, as you said. If they are afraid of like running out of business, that's
And we've seen
terrible,
EVGA is
actually.
gone. Like, this can happen. This has already happened.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much follow through sustainably there will be with the 9070 XT supply, but it's going to sell out. And AIBs, I'm sure, are very eager to get it. I know at launch it's going to be like, I mean, I'm hearing like 3 to 10 times the amount of supply the 5080 had. But the problem is NVIDIA is like 80% of the market. So if AMD is 20% and they are providing, 10 times almost nothing NVIDIA has provided, it's not going to be remotely enough to meet demand here. Let me pivot this forward then. Compressed AI Blocks writes, and it says, this is an open-ended question, but how do you guys feel the GPU market will play out this generation overall? It's the first time in a long time NVIDIA's perception has been hurt, even if it's not a killing blow. And AMD seems to be launching a very compelling product with the 9070 series and at the right prices.
Well, it's kind of hard to predict how the year is going to come out. How many GPUs will be able to make it into the market and will be able to buy them. Actually, I'm always a bit conservative about AMD providing enough GPUs. Because for the last few generations, they did not sell too much, and they have been out of stock as well. And if they can provide some good stock right now, that's going to be very beneficial for them, I think. And again, as I said, Blackwell, well, I know most people don't care that much about efficiency, but NVIDIA cannot continue like that, just raising the wattage again and again, because at some point you just won't be able to support that energy to the GPUs. So I don't know. I mean, people that are still running on 3000 series, they will probably try to upgrade to 5000 to Blackwell if they can get their hands on a card. And as we've seen, there's always going to be people right now that are going to buy GPUs no matter the price once they come out, which I don't think is a cool development in general for GPUs.
Yeah, and it's tricky for AMD because NVIDIA knows that if they produce too many, they can probably still sell them anyways. Like, they'll just make them into AI cards or stockpile them. I mean, I believe, I have to check this. Let me see. I believe the RTX 3060 is still widely available because of how many they made. I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah, they're still out there, although they're starting to go a little up in price. So maybe they're going to finally run out soon. There's one for $300 on Amazon. I don't know. So like, NVIDIA knows that because of their brand name, if they don't buy it, they could probably just hoard it in a warehouse for 3 years. That's what they did with Ampere. So, but I have to think here. Like, I keep reading that 4 nanometer capacity is completely booked up at TSMC, which is of course what both NVIDIA and AMD use this gen. In fact, I think they said they're at 105% capacity, which is funny, which means that there's something they're doing to make more than they're supposed to. But the major way AMD started taking market share from Intel and laptop really wasn't with like Phoenix or Strix Point. Those are the premium models on the cutting edge 4 nanometer node. It was because they keep selling Rembrandt Plus and all of these cheaper, older generations and $200 laptops. So there's a part of me that goes, the 9070 is going to sell out. 9070 XT is going to sell out. They're going to probably get good reviews. That's nice. And hopefully they keep making as many as they would normally make. And there's some degree of to what I'm about to say where you have to go, well, but how many people actually still want a $300 GPU that haven't already bought one? But I can't help but think that, like, it's not the 9070 XT that's going to take market share from AMD if they take it. It's going to be the half as big 9060 XT that they can make twice as many of, and maybe just making a bunch of 7600 XTs. I mean, if RAM isn't in a shortage, I don't think it is, maybe you just drop the price of the 7600 XT to 250 and just keep spitting out 6 nanometer cards to take market share from NVIDIA down there. Well, RDNA 4 still gets you a lot of good reviews, because I don't know how else they could possibly satiate demand. But again, that's tricky, because if they make too many 7600s, then they're stuck with all this last gen stuff. And I don't know, you don't want to go bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, as you just mentioned, the 3060, I think that's a special card because it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So I think that's the main reason why it's still selling and why people still buying it, because it's the cheapest budget or the best budget option for people that need VRAM. Like for 3D stuff, if you want to make a budget 3D rendering machine, you probably buy the 3060 if you're on a tight budget. So I think that's the reason why that's still around.
I would go as far as to say
mainly.
AMD shouldn't bother making a new 8 GB card. There's no point. Like, even if it
Yeah,
costs a little more and seems
absolutely.
a little
No.
wonky, just clamshell it, 9060 XT, 16 gigabyte, and then don't even launch a 9060. Like, just sell the 7600 XT with 16 gigabytes below it and the 7600 with 8 gigabytes
Yeah.
for $200, because there's no point.
Yeah.
Like, no one's going to choose an 8 gigabyte
I agree.
AMD card in this year.
Yeah.
Magnetis Manuel writes in and says, imagine it's March 6th. Would you rather have a premium AIB 9070 XT model that you had to get at Micro Center for $750, or would you go for the 5070 Ti on eBay scalped for $1,200? I predict the 9070 XT is going to be drastically better value when real world prices rather than MSRP are considered. And the tech media saying 9070 MSRP should have been cheaper might be missing that point. Yeah, that's and I guess let's just get into the RDNA 4 discussion now as well. Like, what do you think of RDNA 4? But on top of that, do you agree these things are going to sell out no matter what because of what's going on in the market? And that to a degree, when people complain, well, it should have been 500 and 600, it doesn't matter because you're just arguing what's going to be scalped because there's not enough supply.
Well, I always hope that AMD is able to get a bigger share of the market because, competition, and Nvidia is at a place where people just buy Nvidia for it being Nvidia. And to some extent, I understand that, but it's not a healthy situation that we have going on right now. And the question that he was raising, like, which one would you choose, the 1250 overpriced scalper 5070 or a $700 AMD, whatever? And I still think that a lot of people are still going to buy the Nvidia card because it's Nvidia, and as sad as that is, I still think it's going to happen again, like it has.
The
happened
only
in the past.
reason it might not, I would argue, though, well, I guess there's two reasons. Number one, Nvidia isn't making them. So, like, that would be the number one reason Nvidia could lose market share is anytime AMD's tried to take market share, recently at least, like with RDNA 2, it didn't matter. Nvidia had 8 nanometer. They could make unlimited cards on Samsung comparatively. Not obviously not unlimited because it was still shortages, but like they had that ability to just brute force supply and their brand name carried them through. And then kind of the same with RDNA 3, where I mean, a lot of the market share Nvidia took last gen was with 3060s people. It was not with 4090s. Well, maybe 4090s
Yeah.
still, not 4080s though. And this is the one time I can think of in maybe my life that I can remember where Nvidia just is not making the cards. And so if AMD actually makes them, maybe they will win by default here. Although, and also, I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about the hate out there? Because I don't think I've ever seen this much anger about an Nvidia generation. I mean, people got mad at Turing because ray tracing wasn't worth it, but I don't know. I don't think like this. I think the PhysX thing, the black screens, melting connectors, no supply, apparently missing ROPs on all of their cards. I don't know what's going wrong in validation. There's so many things lining up where I've seen some people argue in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord, like, I don't know, maybe I would get AMD for the same price. I am worried about NVIDIA issues. Do you think that could be a factor here in a way that it wasn't in previous generations?
Yeah, absolutely. As you just mentioned, all these problems. It's a lot of problems at once that we're seeing for this launch. Probably, and again, I hope you're right. There's going to be at least a slight shift in the market because of that. I think that I still think that people still are going to buy more Nvidia cards if they can get them.
But what if they
Um,
can't? And will they really?
but
If the mainstream person might, but I feel like I don't know. Like there's a lot of hate out there, but I never know if it's just the people on Reddit, the vocal
yeah,
minority. I
absolutely.
don't know.
It's hard to predict, actually. I wish that we're going to see this change for at least like don't buy Nvidia cards if they have so many problems. Just don't buy them just because they're Nvidia cards. You know what I mean? Like don't ignore the
Well,
problems there
and
are.
if I may, what message does this send Nvidia if they? And to be clear, I'm not sure if AMD will gain market share overall. I'm sure they will this month because Nvidia isn't
Yeah,
making any cards. But over the course of the whole generation,
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. I'm just saying. I'm just trying to make the argument for why maybe it's possible this time. Um, but like if Nvidia doesn't lose market share this gen, I think every gamer needs to ask themselves what message you're sending to Nvidia. Because what you're telling Nvidia is their drivers don't need to work anymore. Their cards don't need to work anymore. And they don't need to be honest about pricing. I've never seen
yeah.
Nvidia do all of those things at once. I've seen Nvidia not completely lie about pricing with the 3080. Sure. They completely lied about the pricing. I've seen Nvidia have launch issues with Fermi like 15 years ago. But I've never seen Nvidia have unreliable drivers launch issues and like lie about the pricing at the same time. And if they don't lose market share, I just like the
True.
open message to gamers, you're telling Nvidia they don't need to give a fuck about you. Not only do they not have to, but they won't be punished even a little if they do. And that's going to lead to just ridiculousness the following gen.
You know, people are complaining right now that Nvidia is not gaining. Another problem
Mm.
is that Nvidia is not gaining that much performance compared to the previous generation. And when I first heard that, I was like, okay, I thought about you, about your channel, because you know Moore's law is that is happening right now because we are at a point where
Mm.
I think we kind of have to get used to GPUs probably not getting that much performance uplift from generation to generation, just because the physics, you know, we're at a point where we're already seeing it. They have to invent software solutions to give you more performance, like frame generation, multi-frame generation. And I don't think, to be honest, that's going to change a lot in the next few generations unless they kind of invent stuff that's actually accepted by the gamers.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, DLSS is accepted, and DLSS 4 kind of looks amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, it seems like that's almost
But
worse
frame
than last
generation is
gen.
not that accepted, and people are not liking it. Yeah, but you know, just the pure upscaling is amazing, and if they don't manage to get more inventions like that in the future, I think we're have to get used to like 10, 15, 20% uplift for the upcoming generations. And so
Well, no, I agree. Unless, of course, they make some chiplet 2 nanometer $3,000 graphics card, then yes, the uplift will be huge, but it's expensive. But that's where I go, it's not the performance uplift that bothers me, although it's a bit concerning because it does seem like with GDDR7 these should be faster. But it's the way the cards are being treated, like they're not
mhm,
reliable, they
mhm.
don't work. I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah, but
that shouldn't be forgiven.
yeah, but one of these reasons, as I said before, is Nvidia just trying to gain more performance by putting in more wattage, and
Hmm.
that's getting you burned cables, you know, and
Hmm.
they cannot continue like that every time. They at some point they have to stop and focus on efficiency, or your PC is going to use 1,000 watts or more for an entry-level gaming PC, and who wants that?
Yeah, well, and I think I just can't get over this. I really do just think this generation was an afterthought for Nvidia. Like, and the example I would give is because people would go, well, it's not like they're giving the GeForce team less money, even if they're funding AI more.
Yeah,
Yes, but like, I worked at General Motors. I worked at like mega corporations. I know like what it's like to have a company be focusing on one thing versus another. And if you're at Nvidia and you're making a proposal and you're like, "Ooh, I did this AI thing," I bet you get more slaps on the back in a meeting than if you're like, "We optimized the GeForce drivers."
yeah,
Like, there's probably a lot more of like autopilot not paying attention going on with the gaming stuff, even if they're still getting paid the same. Although, on the subject of pay, actually, I will bring this up too. I think another major issue, and I've heard people at NVIDIA tell me this, if you worked at NVIDIA even 5 years ago and were getting stocks, which you were if you worked there, you're probably a millionaire now. So who's working that hard when everyone's retirement account has ballooned to $20 million? There's probably a lot of like mid-level managers that have worked there for 20 years. 20 years ago, NVIDIA stock, I think, was worth like $10 or $15. It was less than 20. I remember when I was that young, like, oh, wow, they hit $20 a share. And if you've been working there for 20 years, you might be worth like $10, $20 million. Like, why would you be working very hard?
So you're suggesting they don't have motivation right now?
No, they don't. And again, that's why, well, again, this brings me back to what I said a few minutes ago. NVIDIA has no motivation to care. They have all the money. All the money that is going to be made in the future, short term, is going to be in AI. And if gamers tell them it's fine if our cards have black screens, you lie to us about specs and this, and they're going to go, oh, good, we don't need to pay attention. They'll just keep buying them no matter what. So
absolutely, yes.
I would really hope people refuse to buy them for that reason alone. This piece of content is sponsored by Wondershare Filmora 14, an app with powerful AI editing tools that can clone your voice and then use it to read transcripts for you, or even just change your voice to a different one so you can become multiple characters for your content. For example, here is Hacker Tom reciting part of that 5090 laptop leak I put out recently.
It's been almost 2 years since this channel exclusively leaks the die sizes and even pictures of Lovelace laptop die configuration.
Additionally, it can add subtitles to videos or even translate your own voice into a different language and then sync your lips to it. So you can reach more audiences and do other essential tasks like compound clips, screen recording, and get you started working quicker than ever as well with their pre-made templates. And the best part, it's available on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, so you can keep busy no matter what device you have access to in a given moment. And yeah, support Moore's Law by clicking on the link in the description and downloading Filmora 14 for free. Again, literally just clicking the download button once through that link helps the channel a ton, and it costs you nothing. Support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out Wondershare Filmora 14 today. Question generated by Jensen GPT writes in and says, the sentiment around RDNA 4 has been generally positive. Right now, AMD is taking up a lot of spots in the Amazon GPU top sellers simply because Nvidia isn't selling cards anymore. The $50 price difference between the 9070 and 9070 XT may be creating some confusion, but overall, people do seem happy. Even my friend that doesn't follow gaming hardware remotely as much as me sent me a link to the Linus Tech Tips video with RDNA 4 yesterday and said they were very excited to try and get one. And so my question is this, assuming RDNA 4 succeeds and that it has enough stock to somewhat satiate GPU demand, what do you think NVIDIA will do to respond? Jensen really hates any time NVIDIA doesn't win anything, which is why we see stuff like the Super Series, which, by the way, I was told he came up with Super as the naming. Do you think NVIDIA will try to flood the market with 5070s and 57 DTIs eventually, or is something stopping them from being able to do that at the moment? So I'll throw that to you first. Do you think, because so far it doesn't really sound like they're making any cards ready enough for the RDNA 4 launch, like NVIDIA isn't to respond, but do you think eventually they're going to do something big with supply, or if AI keeps making money like it is, do you think they will just keep ignoring gamers this gen?
I don't think that Nvidia is going to give up their leadership in this sector, despite they're making the money with AI. I don't think, maybe if it's Jensen who won't accept that, or if someone else at Nvidia, but I mean, again, I hope that AMD is like taking the lead, or like not taking the lead, but is able to shift the percentages of the used cards in this generation. And I think if they really manage to pull off good performance with good prices, then and the most important thing, availability, then they can make that. That can happen. But I don't think that Nvidia is not going to be able to keep up with that in the long run.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I like how I think Jensen would respond to this, because it's like, there's an argument to be made that he shouldn't care. I mean, they're making so much in AI. Why would you care if AMD goes
Hmm.
from 20 to 30% market share? Like, if I were in the Nvidia boardroom, I would argue to Jensen that what we should just do is make a ton of 5060s. That's what most people buy anyways, and ignore the rest of the market, and then assess the damage in a year. If it's really bad, make the 6000 series good, because there's already been a lot of brand name damage to the 5000 series. And so
Hmm.
I feel like it might be better to just tactically retreat, make money in AI, and then for
Probably.
6000 actually make it good. That's what I wonder. But I don't know. I mean, I could see them trying to do something, but I gotta think I can't see them making a ton of 5090s no matter what. I think if they respond, it's just going to be with tons of little 5060s to try to keep market share, and they won't really care what happens with the 5070 and up or something if they're making so much money in AI.
But isn't it 5090 where they make money compared to a 5060?
Not volume wise, right? Because like if I go to Amazon, like yes, per GPU, but in terms of die size with a 5060, I guess I forgot. I think I leaked that. I forgot what the die size was for the 5060. Or maybe I didn't leak that one. I think I leaked 5070. Like, but I think we can all guess it's probably going to be around 150 millimeters squared. So actually, let's do the math. What was it? 150. When we're talking about you can make 5060s for every 5090. So,
Hmm.
I mean, and then you go to Amazon bestseller, best-selling card right now, probably just because everything else is sold out, but 3050, 7800
Hmm.
XT, 4060, 6600, 7600 XT, 3060, 4060, 6600. It's like all 60 class from AMD and Nvidia. So, I mean, I think the argument I would make is let's just make a ton of 5060s because we can make 5 for every 5090. And, maybe you would make probably $1,000 per 5090 sold. But,
Hmm.
you know, who cares? It's peanuts compared to AI, right?
Yeah, sure. It's absolutely.
One of those
That's
would
not where
sell
the
for
money
10
is for
grand in
them.
the AI market. I don't know, maybe more.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to a couple of these kind of supply questions. So, Chris Rich writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. This is more to underline something you said in your RDNA 4 reaction video. If third-party reviews are positive, would you recommend people interested in buying a 9070 go out of their way to get one early? The reason being is this might be the only chance to get MSRP pricing for months, possibly the entire year. This could be a year of shortages. I think it will be. In general, since TSMC's nodes are fully booked according to reports. Um, my advice is yes, assuming you actually want this. Don't just buy something to buy it. But
Yeah.
I think even if it's 20% above MSRP, I don't think they're going to get cheaper this year. I think you
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like what we've seen in the last years, you can buy a graphics card, use it for 2 years, and then sell it for more than you've paid.
Hmm.
So if it's somewhere close to MSRP, just take your chances, buy it if you need it,
Hmm.
of course. And yeah, fire and forget. Like just get it right
Yeah,
now.
I don't think I would buy
Yeah.
one for like $800, but I'd pay $650, maybe $700 if you really need this. Like if you've been waiting for 5 months and this is it, I don't think it's going to get cheaper at all, actually.
Well, coming from a European standpoint, it's going to be much more expensive over here.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, still sure. Because I just looked it up today. The Nvidia RTX
Hmm.
5080, the cheapest one that is listed here is 1,600 euros, which is if we ignore income of the countries, etc., is translated to $1,700, and the most expensive ones are sold like 2,000 euros.
Hmm. Even
So
if you remove
it's
the
crazy.
20% tax, then you're
Yeah.
getting down to like 1,400. That's pretty similar though here, I think. Because let me check though, because I can tell you what RTX 5080s are selling for like $1,800 on eBay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no out of they're just out of stock. They're not even in stock. But when I saw them in stock, they were like $1,500. So I think pretty universally it's bad. But Captain AI Inivo writes in and says, "How much will the US tariffs affect 9070 series pricing in Europe? I'm tempted to buy one, but I'd like to wait for water cooled models to appear." I mean, so my answer is, I think, and I put out a short about this from a longer conversation from a month ago, but like the chaos itself is half of what's going to raise the pricing. Like people hoarding stock, not knowing what to ship. Shipping costs are skyrocketing right now, I'm told, by people in distribution because everyone's worried about tariffs. So everyone's bidding up pricing to ship things quicker to beat the tariff. So I think short term, I mean, the EU is going to be hurt no matter what, just like everyone is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could see the European Union having less of a markup than the US maybe late summer, but I don't know how much or if that will really happen. And I keep coming back to, you just don't you're not going to escape that everyone's on Earth. Like if prices go up somewhere, they tend to go up other places due to competition or lack of competition.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, from my experience, I'm going to assume the worst for RDNA 4 prices over here in Europe, to be honest. The MSRP in the US is like, is it 650 and 600?
600 and 550.
600 and 550. So you can easily add 200 euros to that over here.
So,
at least.
Yeah, and I do know that talking to people in distribution as well, that like they tend to focus the MSRP models in the US more first, especially lately, because they're worried about the tariffs hitting the US right now. And then in Europe, it'll be the same price as the same model in the US, but it will be the overpriced models. You know, like that they'll focus the overpriced models to Europe. Let's see. So my advice though, again, to this person is, I mean, like, don't pay €1,000 for this graphics card, but 700, 750, I don't know. I don't think it's going to get better.
No.
Dark Helmet writes in, I'm looking for a perspective on video encoding with Radeon versus GeForce. My wife has a gardening YouTube channel, and records videos at 4K 60 with her iPhone. I can genuinely see that her videos look better than other gardening channels that only have 1080 videos. She edits with DaVinci Resolve. Her system is a 5950X, a 3080 10 gigabyte. A recent project she worked on took 20 minutes to render, while my 7900 XTX took 7 minutes. Wow. My eyes aren't great, and I couldn't see the difference between the two videos. Does YouTube compression render any encoding quality difference between them irrelevant? I'm considering upgrading her system to RDNA 4 when it launches. Do you think this would significantly speed up encoding times versus her current card? Yeah, I think it would, but I don't know about you, but I use AMD and Nvidia back and forth for 5 years. Well, not for longer than 5 years, but for the YouTube channel for like 6 years. I haven't noticed any difference in quality for the video on YouTube. Have you?
No, I don't think the quality is like depending on the card that you use. It depends on the encoder that you use. So it's the only difference is going to be the speed, the rendering speed. I don't use DaVinci Resolve. I use Adobe Premiere, but I don't think that you will be able to distinguish in quality if you use the same settings. They're basically going to be identical, and especially after YouTube compression, you won't see a difference. It's just it's only about rendering speed, and I don't know. Again, DaVinci Resolve, if that is like behaving well with AMD cards, then sure, go for that AMD card.
Usually it's just, does the app work with it? If it does, the encoder you choose is mostly about, is that encoder faster? Not because all encoders, well, I shouldn't say all, not all, but most encoders are trying to be lossless, as much as they can be. And I would also say, like, RDNA 4 looks like it's going to have a decent creator focus, and I think this is going to be an architecture AMD really like supports for a very long time, like the RX 580. So to just get her something that she'll use for a long time, it's probably a good choice, honestly. Samuel writes in, do you think that UDNA bringing back the high end will depend on RDNA 4's success or not? If so, how well does it need to succeed? How much market share does AMD need to regain to even consider getting back up? What response should we expect from Nvidia if this generation does well and the 5070 Ti sells poorly? So I don't know how closely you follow the discussions on this channel or other channels about UDNA, but an argument I've made, I don't remember if AMD said this directly, is that having CDNA and RDNA is really expensive, because if a gaming graphics card RDNA doesn't sell, we're screwed. Whereas with Nvidia, they have one architecture, and if it doesn't sell to gamers, great, sell to AI, sell to this. And so with UDNA, AMD is going to merge them again. And I've seen some people say that it's because they don't like gamers. And I thought a more like adult opinion is maybe AMD knows they can't afford to make really expensive graphics cards unless they can also sell them to the AI market. And if there's a big UDNA card that can also game, that will give them a justification to make expensive gaming graphics cards again when it makes sense.
Yeah, probably.
But in terms of like how successful RDNA 4 has to be, I mean, yeah, I've heard that there's a lot of pushback in different directions regarding the future of Radeon right now. Not to say that they won't keep making graphics cards, but there's a reason they're not making a high-end card right now. They don't think it makes sense to waste that die, to waste the capacity at TSMC. And so personally, I think RDNA 4 succeeding or not is going to be, does it sell out? Does it keep selling out? Does it keep selling out above MSRP? Because RDNA 3 did well at first, but then they had to sell them for like $300 off. I just think it's a matter of, can they hold their MSRP through the generation? And if they can, what that will show AMD is this is worth investing in. We're not going to have to sell the 7900 XT for $600, when we wanted to sell it for $900 again, if we just do it right.
Yeah, from a gamer's perspective, I think a lot of that is going to depend on how well FSR 4 is going to perform. That's going to be going to play a big role in how successful they'll be this generation. Also, to be honest, I've used Nvidia cards for the last few years because I'm not only gaming, but I'm using them productive for Blender and Adobe Premiere Pro and Photoshop and stuff. So my focus has always been on Nvidia, although I would have loved to swap and to change that. But in the end, I always ended up with Nvidia cards because of that. But if they manage to like give good results on that terrain, then I personally would like at least consider swapping finally to an AMD card.
Yeah, my experience is that with RDNA 2, it really was not as good for creators as Ampere. It just wasn't. I mean, they had driver issues at first, not for gaming, but they weren't even supported on some professional apps at first, and they just weren't as fast. I mean, you had 3070s that, assuming you don't run out of VRAM, that could do things a 6800 could do for cheaper. And then my experience with RDNA 3, because I mostly used Ampere and then Lovelace, but I did mess around with the 7900 XTX, and I have messed around with some APUs recently, and it's night and day from RDNA 2. It's like so much faster, slicker, more stable. So I would imagine that's not too much of a concern anymore, although it certainly actually was a concern a few years ago. But I'll say this as well, as your point about FSR 4, I think is actually a good one. I think a lot riding on what AMD does with the future of Radeon has to do not just with, does it sell well, because half of that is just maybe there's no competition and that's why it sold well. I think a lot of it also is like a test sometimes for if leadership at AMD thinks the Radeon team has what it takes to keep pushing harder. Like a counter example of this I would give is Intel Arc. Raja Kadori just lied to the rest of them how well it was working, and the reason he was sacked, the reason they gutted the ARC team, the reason everything has been so little with like no supply and it's basically in zombie mode right now, is that Alchemist was a test and it failed, and they're like, you guys don't have what it takes to compete with AMD and Nvidia, so we're going to fire half of you in the next layoffs. And I think FSR 4 is going to be a test. They're going to be like, FSR 3.1's fine, but you guys took way too long to release it. I think Hyper RX got you banned from Counter-Strike 2. Like, you guys need to prove to us that FSR 4 is good, it works, and that the drivers are stable at launch. None of this Wattman crashes for the first month of release, like every AMD launch for a few years there. So I think so. I think you're right that FSR 4 is going to need to deliver and be consistent. It won't be as good as DLSS 4, I'm sure, but it needs to be better or around 3.5 or something like that, and just work. Just like they need to prove that they're professionals to Lisa Su, so she doesn't go, why am I seeing reports of Counter-Strike crashing? Like, what is going on, guys? Because if she keeps seeing her teams, I think, fail to deliver fail to look like they are as buttoned up as Nvidia, they're going to go, why would I give you any more money? The Ryzen team keeps delivering.
Yeah, true.
Dave Schultz writes in, with FSR4 probably requiring some kind of AI accelerators, not probably, it will. Do you think it will still be made available for older cards or iGPUs, especially considering that Strix Point or Strix Halo, we're using RDNA 3.5, have neural accelerators on that SoC at a minimum? I do. I think it'll be RDNA 4 only at first, but I think there's going to be an update where like it uses the same stuff RDNA 4 does, but it's just like a lower quality because it's not as good at the AI acceleration. Don't you think they kind of have to support previous gens with FSR 4 at least to some degree?
Well, you are much more deep into that topic, but I hope they do. I mean, I've tested Strix Halo, and if FSR4 would work there, it would be amazing. I mean, it's sad that it probably won't work on like the older gaming handhelds with the 780M and stuff. I don't know if they managed to pull that off, but I don't really care if you have to get a new one. A new graphics card for FSR4 if it's delivering, if it's working good, because Nvidia proved that people will buy your stuff if you have new tech. And I mean, DLSS has been so much better than FSR in the past, and that's also a reason why people bought RTX cards in the first place. I personally think so, because RTX hasn't, the ray tracing has not been the pull factor for most people. I think DLSS has been. Yeah, I don't know if they can. You probably know more about that, if they manage to implement FSR4 on all the cards.
I'm trying to remember. I said something about this a few weeks ago after talking to a source about it. I mean, I think it was some degree of like there is a plan to either like have some forked version of FSR. It's not ready right now, but it will work with older ones. And now that we're talking about this, I don't think it would be very hard. Like, I'm not a programmer. You know, I went to college for mechanical engineering, not computer. But I will say, I have to imagine that, like, and I hear this from developers, that, like, the thing that would make FSR4 get more and more adoption is just being easy to implement. And I hear that FSR 3.1 was easier to use than 3. Those 2 was much easier to use than 1, if you can believe it. And that FSR 4 is the easiest to use. And so from that perspective, if developers are like really excited that FSR 4 is really easy to add to your game, then I would think, can't you just somewhere there in the code, like look at how they're taught. I'm forgetting all the terms, but like the way they calculate not just by pixels, but they're also using motion for DLSS. And I think there's a new thing they're using, those vectors or something for calculating it. Like there's all these different ways of calculating the upscaling with an AI algorithm. I don't see why you can't just have like FSR4 be at a minimum as good as FSR 3.1. And there's just a checked box in the pipeline. Has this component? Yes. Use vector, calculations. Has this? Use spatial. Has this? And my suspicion would be there would be subcategories too of like how much to use them. And you would just go, yeah, it's easy. Look, FSR 4 uses all of it. FSR 3.5 uses half of 2 of these and not one of them. And at RDNA 3, the RDNA 3.5 uses half of some and none of one. And then like RDNA 3 uses a little bit of a couple, and RDNA 2 doesn't get it because it just doesn't have it. I have to imagine somewhere there in the code you could do that. And in fact, it'd be very easy also to add like tensor cores, yes, no, enable for tensor cores. Although if I was AMD, I would tell Nvidia to patch it themselves. And then developers would want to use this even more because they could go, we have one thing. It always looks the best depending on the hardware you have. Like they could even like look at how Intel doesn't have a checkbox for certain features. I don't think that would be very hard. I don't see why they couldn't do that now that we're talking about it.
So you're suggesting that like FSR4 will be able to be used on RDNA 3, 3.5, but with less quality or with less performance? Or
I would suggest, yeah, both. I would suggest, I don't know why they couldn't do that. But again, this would be like, asking me my opinion about how easy it will be to go the speed of light. I didn't study, I guess I did take one space class in college, but like a freshman class. I didn't go to NASA. So, I don't see why they can't just have the code, have FSR, have the drivers look have the game look and go, this is the level of hardware you have. So yeah, we'll use turn up these settings. This. It's no different than resolution too. I mean, like you can look at a given hardware, you can have very simple stuff like you have 16 gigs of RAM, 4K, you have 1440. Like if you can do that, I don't get why you can't look in hardware and go, this has this types of hardware, and so we're going to turn on this type of vector calculation,
Hmm.
and in this one
Hmm.
we're not, and so there will be a little more ghosting with RDNA 2. Maybe they'll be forced to, it'll be just a little less sharp with RDNA 3.5, but if you could get that to work and get it to do that type of scanning on Intel and Nvidia graphics cards, if I'm a developer, that's very, very tantalizing to me, that I could go, oh, I have a one-stop shop here that scales in quality with all of them depending on what they have, all the way down to a 1060. I think that's how you convince developers to use your software over DLSS that only works on,
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, it doesn't even work on some of their own cards. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope that it will be possible to use that, because any kind of upscaling technology, I'll take it. Because I'm also testing so many
mhm.
APUs and integrated graphics, and it has been a blessing for these chips. Absolutely, it actually made gaming handhelds possible in
Yeah.
the first place. I don't think we would be where we are right now without FSR making that open source and be able to use that on any kind of graphics card, actually.
Yeah, and I think there's rumors going around today. And although I think these rumors existed a while back, that AMD still might not use RDNA 4 for Medusa Halo, so the Halo coming out in a year or something.
Hmm.
And if
Hmm.
that's still going to use something like RDNA 3.5, or who knows, RDNA 3.8 or whatever they call it,
Mm.
then I feel like they have to make it work on them, because that means they're going to be selling
Yeah,
APUs for 5 years that
yeah,
don't have RDNA 4. So that's just common
that's
sense to
true.
me. Like, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
But on that subject, let's get to one of the major reasons I wanted to have you on now as opposed to another time. You tested Strix Halo. So, I mean, let's just start at the top level. Were you impressed? And how would you summarize Strix Halo right now?
Yeah, well, when Strix Halo was first leaked, announced, and people were expecting it to have a 4070 laptop kind of
At
performance.
80 watts is what
Uh,
it said, to be
uh,
fair.
yeah, people have been skeptical about that, and I get that. And I was like, even if they managed to pull off a 4060, that would still be impressive. And actually, they managed to kind of pull off a 4060 performance. Jared's tech, he tested the 4060, um, uh, but at a higher TDP with the 80 watt Strix Halo CPU APU that we have in the Asus Z13, and there the 4060 was like 15-20% ahead of that. But I still think that's an impressive result, considering it's only 80 watt for the CPU and the GPU. It's absolutely astonishing. I also tested this with lower wattages, where it kind of destroyed previous APUs and iGPUs on so many levels. Yeah, I've been impressed. I mean, it's not quite there where they suggested it would be, but maybe if once I can get my hands on a 120 watt TDP chip, it will actually be close to the 4070. Maybe I suggest. So I would guess that another 20% of performance uplift with the full TDP is possible. Maybe some updates like BIOS and drivers will get us some more performance as well. Overall, I think it's a very impressive card. Also in terms of efficiency, like that it's able to pull off that performance despite having so many
Mm.
cores at lower wattages. That's kind of impressive. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at some of your testing too, and it was pretty interesting with power scaling. The GPU just wants more power. It'll just keep going. I mean, I'm sorry, the CPU. The CPU just wants more power. It's a desktop class 16 core. I mean, you could probably scale it to 200 watts and it keep giving you a little bit of performance. But especially, I'm looking at your testing here with 5-watt steppings in Cinebench R23, which Gerard can put on screen. It's like you want at least 15 watts. For being honest, probably 60 watts to really let it go. And even at 90 watts, it gets a huge boost. The GPU, though, is kind of a little more odd because I would have expected, I don't know, how do I put this? Like, I would have expected it to really need a lot more power, but it doesn't seem to need that much, but it does keep scaling. And it'll be interesting to see desktop variants that run at 100 watts or more tested against 100 watt 4060s, because that is where I think you're going to see, because at least what I remember seeing a couple years ago on charts was like 80 watt 4070 versus like 125 watt Strix Halo. They wanted that to be the tie. And it's actually a little odd to me. The Flow has a 30 watt variant of this thing that really seems like it needs more power, right? Like just
What do you mean, like with this 30 watt variant?
Like for like the ROG Flow Z13, they're limiting this thing to 30 watts. This thing clearly benefits, like usually, and then even like, what is it, like turbo is like kind of 75 watts or something. 60. Yeah. So this thing is really meant to be at 100 watts. I almost wonder if it should just have Strix Point, or like why they would give it the full 40 compute units, because that 40 compute unit model is really meant to be competing with like 80 watt MacBooks, not and above, not Lunar Lake.
Yeah, actually, for the Asus, you can go as low as 28 on the Asus Z13 by the Army Crate software that they provide. But I was able to, or it's possible to lower the TDP furthermore with x86 tuning utility down to like 10 watts, and below 10 watts, it's just going to ignore any settings that you choose. What I was surprised about is that I thought that the efficiency would actually be better at lower wattages. But then again, I think it's not, because it has so many cores that at some point, like it's leveling out the efficiency, because
there's a floor.
Because if you're going down to, let's do the math, if you go down to 25 watts, it has to power the RAM with the 25 watts, so we have to reduce it by 2, so we have like 23 watts, and it has 16 cores it has to feed with these 23 watts and the GPU. So I think that's the reason why we're not seeing an improvement in efficiency if we lower the TDP. So if we would have less cores, I think the efficiency would raise for that chip at lower TDPs. And yeah, as you said, the efficiency maximum is like at around 60 watt is the best, I think, for this Z13 at least, that you can get with 60 watt. At 80 watt, you're not getting that much more performance for the additional 20 watt. And if we take a look at the maximum TDP, this chip is going to be able to handle like 120 watts, which is another 50% in wattage. I don't think we will be getting more than like maybe an additional 20%. Well, not with
this thing's cooling though, right? That's the thing.
Of course,
it's tablet cooling. And you got to wonder if like why they would put 16 cores in a tablet to try to cool. It feels like it seems silly to me.
I mean, they're doing a good job cooling it. I think it's okay.
For the size, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hearable, definitely, if you like really ramp up the fans, but it's not terrible. It's loud, but it's not terrible. I've heard much louder gaming laptops, for sure. But I still think, like, for even if in a better laptop, I don't know if we're getting more than another 20% of performance. I don't know. We will have to see.
Well, I mean, my point isn't like about build quality for the Flow 13. I'm sure that it's the best it could possibly be in a tablet that big, let's say, or close.
Probably, yes.
But I'm looking at one of your comparisons here. You have the ROG Ally X that is a 780M. It's not even Strix. It's But was the Ally X use Hawkpoint? It probably still uses Phoenix or the Z1 Extreme, doesn't it?
This is C1 Extreme, yes.
Yeah, so it's not even Hawkpoint. So this is like 1.5 gen RDNA 3 APU, not even the second gen of it fully. And I have a thing here I'm looking at that you tested, like Hogwarts Legacy. The Z13 with an 8060S, 30 watts to 30 watts is only 63% faster. You can say that's impressive, but it has over 3 times the compute units over, like it's very clear to me that if you want this to be at 30 watts or even 60 watts, probably 8 cores with 32 compute units is the better pairing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think that, I mean, obviously this chip, the maxed out version, the 395 plus, was not designed with 30 watts in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's obviously not the case, but still it's impressive what it can achieve with that low wattage. So, but you've seen the video that the Fox did.
Yeah, I want to bring that up too, because he did testing with a 390 and a 395.
Yes.
For those who don't know, the 390 is 12 cores instead of 16, 32 compute units instead of 40, and because this is very different from the 370 and the 365, the two Strix points. There were certain TDP levels where they got the same performance. That never happened with this. The 395 was always scaling, and Jard can put this chart on screen here, like always scaling above it. I have to assume it's just better yields, number one, but number two, and this is something the Fox talks about a lot, more compute units clocked lower tends to be more efficient. So it still seems like 390 to 395, you're paying more for more no matter what TDP you're at. But I have to wonder, like, pound for dollar here, like performance per dollar, the 385 is probably the one that's going to show us that it's weaker. But if it costs half as much, it's probably only like 20% slower and a 60 watt, or whatever. Ever feel like a dog chasing its tail as you scour dozens of eBay postings and seedy websites looking for a safe way to get reasonably priced Microsoft software? Well, you don't have to do that. Just go to cdkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffer.com, that offers both Microsoft operating systems, Office products, select games, and even some gaming hardware peripherals for reasonable prices. And they've been a sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead and the entire team here for years for a reason. They've been good to me. They've been good to Dan. They've been good to dozens of me and Dan's family members and friends for years now. And they've also been good to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So whether you're looking for Steam, EA, Uplay, or PlayStation keys, or of course Microsoft products or gaming peripherals, support Moore's Law is Dead by using the offer code BrokenSilicon for 25% off all Microsoft products and Die Shrink for 3% off everything else on the website. Support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting one of our best long-term sponsors, cdkeyoffer.com, today.
I mean, I was baffled by these results because I was expecting that the chip with less cores would actually do better at the lower wattages, despite having a bit less CU cores, or like CUs. But my guess is, probably you can confirm that the 390 is actually like defective 395s.
Mm-hmm.
They did not make that chip on purpose. It's just what's happening in the process. Yeah, it's just a worse version of the 395 with like deactivated CUs. I don't know. That's the reason why it's not performing good on the lower wattages, because he said he was not able to get it running at like 10 or 15 watt. He had to give the CPU more power to get it running, which that makes no sense to me, other than it's defective.
I think two things could be going on. I think number one, maybe there's something, and this is like the first laptop to launch with Strix Halo, so maybe it's early drivers. Maybe, and this does happen sometimes with benefits, but sometimes with negatives, is maybe they just program the BIOS and the scaling and the power and the clocks with the 395 in mind, and the 390 was an afterthought, and so it's not really optimized for the more cut down model at all. Number two, though, I think it's quite plausible that what's going on as well is this isn't a 5090. This isn't something that, or 4090 is maybe a better example, where we saw that the 4090 had 450 watt TDP, and we all thought it would be crazy. In reality, it typically uses 300 to 350 watts because it's always it's almost never running at full tilt because it's so powerful. It's the opposite with an APU. This thing's always maxed out. It's always struggling to hit peak performance because it's much weaker. And I wouldn't be surprised if like the 40 compute unit model, the 395 is like running at 2.2 gigahertz, 2.5. And because of that, it's using less energy than this 32 compute unit model trying to hit 3 gigahertz to get the same performance. And then that causes throttling because that can happen. You can have a smaller chip clocked faster actually use more energy than the bigger chip. And I have to assume it's a combination of that with the 390 just kind of not being as optimized for this product. And I would suspect with the 385, were you to actually optimize for it, even if it was weaker, it would probably be like maybe not half the price, but like decently cheaper, well, only being a little weaker. But I don't know for sure.
Yeah, my guess would be the same.
Itch Nusa writes in and says, I saw other reviews from past Moore's Law Z visitors where the Asus Strix tablet was compared against other 4060 classic laptops, and the price difference was considered a negative point for Strix. But in my honest opinion, this seems unfair because you're comparing an Asus premium form factor to other products that would always have cost less. So 2 questions. Number 1, did you consider comparing the Asus 2025 Strix C13 against the new top Intel 4060 based unit? It provided a better view of Strix benefits at the same price range. And 2, do we know if and when more standard Strix than 14 to 15 inches will see the light of day and the price target? Thank you. Yeah, I don't know about number 2, right? But what do you think about question number 1?
About the comparing the previous Z13 with
right, because I didn't think about this. I've seen a lot of people say that, like, well, so far Strix Halo seems expensive, but it's like, I mean, yeah, they're putting it in laptops that usually cost over $2,000 anyways, so they were already that expensive.
Well, to be honest, I was expecting Strix Halo to be quite expensive. In the first place, no matter which laptop, mini PC, whatever, where you will be able to get it, and I think that's going to be true, at least in the near future. But of course, the Asus Flow Z13 is a premium product where you definitely pay a premium price no matter what hardware is in it. So it would always start at around $2,000 for a reason. So that's definitely true that this is the main reason why it's so expensive. I think in a cheaper laptop we would probably be at around $199, like $2,000 or euros price range would be possible. But I still think that, especially in the beginning, we're not going to see much cheaper mini PCs, laptops, whatever, with this chip, at least in the first few months.
The only thing I could bring up is, and I guess we have some questions about this too, so maybe we'll get to it now, is the Framework mini PC desktop. I looked at the pricing for it. It doesn't seem overpriced to me, like actually at all. Like, actually, if I'm going to say this, I better pull it up so I know what I'm talking about here.
It's not overpriced, but it's quite expensive as well. I don't think you can configure it with the maxed out chip below 2000.
Yeah, that comes with 128 gigabytes of RAM, though. I mean, so here's my point. Like, right. So for $1,100, you get a 385, which let's say that's the equivalent of like a $300 CPU, an 8-core. You get the 8050S, which so that's 32 compute units. So that's, you're getting, say, a $300 GPU with it, perhaps. All right, so we're already to $600 for this thing. We add $100 worth of RAM, $700, motherboard for $150, $850, add cooling, the case. This seems like almost the same price as building a desktop separately. So I'm not seeing how this is that. Now, the 128 gigabyte model costs $2,000, but again, now this is coming with a $600 CPU, a $350 GPU. Like what, $300 worth of RAM? I mean, unified. So I don't know. I think that's a good comparison actually too, is when you don't have the Asus Flow form factor, you get 128 gigabytes of RAM in this desktop instead of 32 for a cheaper price. So that does suggest if you remove all the special bells and whistles, you're removing $500 or more off the cost of this thing.
That's actually does not sound too bad to be true, to be honest.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think we're gonna have to see, right? This is an opinion I've long held too. I don't know if this will happen because I agree with you. They're going to put this in the most expensive stuff for the foreseeable future, I think. Besides the framework, I guess. But eventually, I mean, we're talking about something that shouldn't cost as much as some of these other things to make. Like you've got two 70 millimeter squared chiplets for the CPU. I believe it's like one 400 or 300 millimeter squared, something like that for the GPU. Okay, so that's the equivalent of like, you know, you don't even have a separate IO die like you would if or like the extra silicon if you had like another 16 core with a dedicated GPU. The total silicon is no different than having like a 4060 or 4070 with a 16 core. And so if there's no more silicon, and the RAM would probably cost a bit more, but you know, I don't know how much more overall packaging it in there. And now you only have to cool one SoC. You don't need a cooler for the 4060 and a cooler for that. I don't see why this costs more to make, actually. Like it shouldn't.
It's interesting. You're looking at this from a totally different perspective than I would, because I don't know how much die sizes cost the manufacturers to make. What I see is people are expecting, or I assume that people would expect to get mini PCs, laptops very soon with this CPU at around $1,200, $1,500. And my guess a few weeks back was no, you're not going to see that. For like reasons that AMD wants to make money with this, and they're not going to like compete with their own hardware, like laptop GPUs and
Well,
stuff.
they don't sell any laptop GPUs, so I don't think they have to worry about that.
True, that's true.
I honestly do think a lot of Strix Halo is they've given up on selling GPUs and laptops because no one buys them.
Yeah.
But you know, when you see the framework for this price, although to be fair, when does the framework actually launch? Isn't it like it's not now? I think it's like second half of this year, so it's not like it's launching right away. But I do think that's just a fair point of like, I think short term it's going to be really expensive in things that were always going to be expensive. But I don't see why eventually, like the 8-core 32 compute unit model can't be cheaper than a 4060 laptop. It literally should cost less to make.
Yeah, sure. For the lower end model, yeah, true.
For the top end, I think they're always going to charge a lot because, I mean, let's be honest, like they have something no one else has. Compressed iBlocks writes in, do you think we'll see gaming laptops with the Strix Halo APU only and like 64 gigabytes of RAM? I know that's a kind of workstation type laptop, but I meant more in a gaming chassis with the airflow cooling as a priority with a maximum TDP. My answer is probably not. That like maybe for someone, but I think the models that have a lot of RAM are unique and Nvidia has no answer to them for AI stuff. I feel like those are always going to get a lot of RAM. I think we could see like a 385 8-core gaming laptop for like 1200, but I think they're going to give it 32 gigabytes of RAM. I think they're going to want you to pay extra for something that literally like no one's making a chip with that much unified memory, and I think they're going to charge for those models.
Yeah, it does not make sense to give out these chips with less than 32 gigabytes of RAM, of course, for a gaming laptop. To be honest, it would be a niche product. I could imagine that it would be a thing, and that someone is going to make like a niche laptop, at least try out how people will react to it. Maybe for people that do some gaming and also do some like AI models, LLMs, whatever. But it's not going to be like a big seller. I don't think so.
Well, and if you actually want to maximize, price performance, for being honest, you'd probably want to use Hawk Point with like a, you know, what it would be called with like a 9060M. You're like, you don't need more than Zen 4 8 cores for gaming.
No.
And like, so that's what I would think they would do too. Or even Zen 3 with it. I don't know. Let's see. Lucas writes in and says, Framework just made some waves with the Strix Halo mini desktop PC. Do you think there is enough of a market for tiny desktop AI PCs to warrant a product like this, regardless of who makes it? And so I think this is just a good question for you. Like, there's been this explosion of mini PC companies. To be fair, even though we talk about them a lot, they don't sell a fraction of what HP or Dell does. But
Mm.
like, how do you feel about how this market is going, and how big do you think it could get? Because it is, again, it is interesting. Um, the AI Max 385 one is about the same price or cheaper than just building a desktop yourself. I mean, I've got this thing here that Minis Forum sells,
Hmm.
and it's like, I think 1200 or less, and it has a 7600 MXT and a 12 core Zen 4, not 12, 16 core Zen 4. I mean, this is cheaper than building your own desktop. Like, do you think this could keep growing and growing as becoming a more standard, like, kind of budget gaming PC?
Well, to be honest, I'm pretty, yeah, I was pretty surprised that so many people are interested in mini PCs. I did not see that coming like 1 or 2 years ago, that there's a market for that,
Mm.
especially for like people I get so many comments, like people wishing for Strix Halo mini PCs. They would like
I know, so many comments. Yeah.
replacing their desktops, that they would be doing that. I did not expect that, to be honest. So I think there's a market. I was surprised that there is. Um, I think we're going to see a lot more in that perspective, like a lot more mini PCs with better iGPUs, with better APUs in the future. That's just, I think that market is just starting right now, actually.
Yeah, I think it keeps coming back to, like, I don't know what the level of performance was exactly where this happened, but I might argue just like PS5 level performance, 1080 Ti or a 3060 or a 6700 XT or 6700, like that level of performance that we've had for years now is where, to this day, you can still do, I mean, 1440p. Honestly, high refresh rates, medium to high settings. Like, it's a level of performance that's enough. And Strix Halo is a bit stronger than that. At
Mm,
least I assume it will be once they push it harder on a desktop. And I just think there's a lot of people that half of the fun of building a desktop was how much money you're saving. And if
mm,
you're not saving money anymore to build it yourself, why go through the hassle? And I have to be honest, like, a lot of these mini PCs I've been testing, they're really snappy. They're like really
mm,
fast. They don't produce heat. Like, it's not about energy savings for me. It's about my room stays cold.
mm,
And I just wonder. I agree, it's surprising. I couldn't believe how many people when Strix Halo was announced, or when I first leaked it in 2023. People were like, one of the first comments is, I can't wait until this is in a mini PC. And I'm like,
mm,
I think this is clearly for like a MacBook Pro competitor. I don't think this is
mm.
for, but it just seems like, what do you think it is? I think it's the ease of use and the fact that it's actually cheaper to just get a mini PC now, and it wasn't before.
Well, if it's cheaper, I mean, I think that mini PCs, if once they get more popular, the price is going to go up
Mm.
a bit, especially for mini PCs with like Strix Halo. We're not going to see Strix Halo mini PCs for $800 or less. I don't think
No,
so
I don't think so.
anytime soon. And I still think people are hoping for that or expecting that, but
Mm.
sorry, that's not going to happen. Nevertheless, I think that would be. I mean, it's absolutely on. It's, as you said, it's snappy. It's absolutely on desktop level at this point, because like. I mean, many PCs basically are laptops in a smaller form factor without the display, and as laptops have been improving so much in the last 5 to 10 years, performance-wise, they really are catching up. Like CPUs are almost as good as their desktop counterparts, with less energy,
Hmm.
less heat, and you can do good mini PC cooling for sure right now. They're not loud. They don't have to be loud. I mean, some of them are, but they don't have to
No,
be.
they don't have to be.
Um, um, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of gaming mini PCs in the future.
Yeah. And I'll speak for myself as well. A year ago, God, has it already been a year? It's already been a year. I went from a 2060 I think Comet Lake laptop to a Hawk Point 8-core Minisforum tablet as my main laptop. And I don't think I'm ever going back to that combo again. I mean, it's enough. I can play all my games, even Battlefield 128 player, okay enough on a tablet, and
Mm.
not having, and it's especially a problem I find with laptops, another graphics driver on there that breaks and doesn't work and has problems. There's an ease of use and reliability feature and just software. Like, there's one less mega driver. You don't need Nvidia and Intel or Nvidia and AMD. You just need AMD. It's not
Mm.
getting confused which graphics card to use. It
Mm.
just works. And
Yeah.
I can say that I don't think Strix Halo is quite at the performance level where I would just dump my 4090 PC for it. But if it was 50% faster, I would consider it. And I have to be honest, if Minis Forum eventually sends me a Strix Halo desktop, there's a part of me that will consider getting rid of the 4090, assuming the rendering is mostly the same speed, just because
Hmm.
it's just easier. It's so much easier. And I think there's also a component of this as well where, like, it's not just that they're snappy, don't you think? But like, man, it just works. It boots up faster. It never crashes.
Yeah,
And I think people are
that's
tired of
true.
this.
That's true. Compared to my AM5 desktop, these mini PCs boot like 10
Yeah.
times faster because of the RAM training it has to go through every time and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, we're at the level where like even cheap mini PCs are so snappy that you don't, if you're depending on what you do, you don't need a desktop anymore.
Mhm.
You know, you just need a desktop if you love building a desktop, if you love playing high end, if you like doing rendering stuff or video editing or 3D stuff. But even then, we're getting to a point where more and more people are considering, for a reason, to quit that and to switch to mini PCs, laptops, whatever. So I don't know if 4090 can be replaced in terms of render speed
Yeah.
with Strix Halo. It depends on the software you're using, I guess. I mean, Nvidia still has a big lead in 3D rendering, and I still think that for most part, Adobe software is like benefiting from using Nvidia hardware compared to AMD or Intel. But yeah, I think we're going to see big shifts here in the future.
Chris just writes in and he says, "Hi, Manuel. Is it possible to disable the Infinity Cache on Strix Halo? If so, it would be interesting to see gaming benchmarks on it. I think follow-up designs could make use of even more Infinity Cache as well." Yeah, so I actually had reached out to Carrie No Sugata while we were recording, who's a contributor to Moore's Law is Dead, and I asked, is this a thing you can do? Can you disable Infinity Cache?
Yeah, I was wondering the
And
same
he
thing,
reminded me, I
actually.
guess, in a Linux driver. When was this from? Yeah, it's a Linux driver, I guess, with RDNA 2, you could. And I think I do remember some tests with that back in the day where they tried to simulate. And it was interesting. It didn't lose as much performance as you would think in some scenarios. Like, but
I was wondering what he was, where he was planning to go with that question, because what would be the outcome of disabling the Affinity Cache, just to see how much this adds to the performance?
yeah, some
You
real
know,
nerd stuff. Also, I can tell you personally, I want to know if the 40 CU model keeps up with the PS5, because PS5 doesn't have Infinity Cache. It has more L2 cache per compute unit, I believe, than RDNA 2 does. But I mean, I'd be very curious to see, like, can we test how much Sony would gain adding or Microsoft adding Infinity?
okay,
But
so
it is
yeah,
only just to test. There's really no other reason than that. Or, and also you
yeah.
could test the. I guess we will be able to do this. I know the 380 has 16 compute units, just like Strix Point. So I'm really going to be
Mhm.
curious what 16 compute units with Infinity Cache looks like compared to 16 compute units without it. Although I think it might still have a 256-bit bus, so that does. But you could clock that lower. You could try to account for that. I don't know. I don't know if you have else to say, but like, if you could, is that something you would test though, or is that probably low on the totem pole?
I have never thought about that, to be honest. I mean, the bandwidth thing with Strix Halo certainly is uh, a big plus for, like, I feel like, you know, the RTX 4000 series laptop GPUs. They had terrible bandwidth sizes, like 4050, 4060, like 96, and the 4070 was at 128. And I think that this was a reason why we've seen bad frame times and micro-stuttering for those GPUs. And with the Strix Halo, with its 256-bit bandwidth, it's just so smooth, all the games run super smooth. It's amazing for an iGPU. It's the best experience. It's even better than many laptops with GPUs I've tested in the past had. Actually, to this date, if you get a cheap Nvidia laptop that's not configured well, you're getting microstutters, and you're getting not so good frame times, Yeah, and not on this machine. It's super stable. Part of it might be the CPUs, the CPU cores, the amount of CPU cores, the big VRAM you can assign to it is certainly playing a big role in that. The latest tests I've done is actually raising the VRAM size to 16, which actually seemed to help, especially at 1440p and 4K. It actually does a good job there.
That's why you wish they would give the gaming one 64 gigabytes of RAM, so you could do 24 and 24 or something. That would be nice.
Yeah, that would be then. It would last for years to come, for sure. I think that bandwidth plays a big role in stability and the smoothness of the gameplay for these chips. So from a scientific standpoint, sure, we could do that, but I don't know if it's possible for these Z13 to disable Affinity Cache.
I don't know. I would certainly like to see, who would Jared's, would he do that? I don't know. See someone spend some time tinkering and see what it shows. But you touched on something that I also want to touch on as well, which is I see people talking about price performance for a 4060 or 4070 laptop versus Strix Halo. To me, as you could probably tell by my eye roll, I think it misses the point a bit, because you're getting something more efficient. You're getting something that's snappier, has less issues, has better VRAM. Like you say, it's so smooth. Don't you think then, or where do you think that crossover point is, where it's let's say you have a 4070 laptop and they're usually paired with Intel, and some 2+8 core or 6+8 core Arrow Lake CPU or something, or worse one. I mean, oftentimes they'll pair it with a 2+8 or something weaker, and they're just yeah, but look, this has a 4070. The Strix Halo one for the same price is 10% weaker, and it's are we really going to ignore the fact that not only is the battery life and efficiency going to be more consistent for the Strix Halo system, but you're not going to run into the VRAM issues. You're not going to run into as much micro stuttering. Your drivers will be more stable. Again, driver issues with laptops, for me, much bigger than driver issues with desktops in my experience lately. If there's dedicated GPU, isn't there a point where you just go, the performance is going to feel better if you get the weaker APU, if it's within 30%?
Absolutely. I would, to be honest, depending on the laptop and the price, of course, I would pick Strix Halo.
Even if the other one was stronger.
From what I've experienced here. Yeah, depends on how much stronger, but if we are in the 10-15% range, definitely, I would pick the iGPU because of more flexibility with the VRAM, smoother gameplay, better battery life, probably smaller form factor. A lot of reasons, actually, without hesitation.
All right. Luck has had it that one of my sources got back to me while we were talking, so I'm actually going to do a leak right now. I've already leaked pictures of Medusa Point and Olympic Ridge / Medusa Ridge / Medusa Desktop. The replacement of Strix Point has 12-core chiplets that are shared with at least Desktop and Medusa Halo, I'm told. And that means you're going from, with Strix Point, 4 little cores and 8 big cores to just 12 big cores. It seems to still have just 16 compute units. So I think for that one, we're going to see a modest GPU performance uplift, but a large CPU. I think for Medusa Halo, which I know has 2 12-core chiplets, that's right there, a 50% uplift in CPU performance versus Strix Halo. I think that's very exciting. What I've also just been told is that it's going to go from 40 to 48 compute units for Medusa Halo, so 20% more.
Mhm.
And that it's
Mhm.
also going to possibly have a 384-bit variant. So what would that be? 50% more bandwidth. There will still be a 256-bit IO die, I believe, with
Okay.
less compute units, but there's going to go up to 384. And so I think we're looking at something that's probably 30 to 50% faster in iGPU performance. I guess I'm just curious, what do you think that means for the market, especially if it launches a year from now? Like you're getting probably 50% more CPU and multi-threading and 30 to 50% more GPU from what you have now.
Yeah, I think we're absolutely at a point where APUs are probably starting to replace entry and mid tier GPUs. Definitely, at least for some people. And if that's going to be true, the numbers you just said, then definitely like 40, 60, 50, 60 probably don't have like
Much of a
there's no need
point.
for them anymore. Yeah, there's no point for that. Especially like I think one big benefit definitely is the VRAM, that you won't have to worry about VRAM anymore. Like
Mm,
I'm
me too.
so sick of 50 70s with 8 gigabytes and 50 70 laptop GPUs with 8 gigabytes. Even the 5070 Ti 12 gigabyte will probably be the
Hmm.
best selling Nvidia laptop GPU in this generation, because 8 gigabyte is just outrageous. And yeah, that's just solving so many problems, and people won't have to worry about that anymore.
Hmm. AI Max Pro Plus Ultra XTXX writes in.
Oh,
I
Jesus.
know. Jared finally did a fair review of the Strix Halo GPU. Not sure that's a dig at. And looked neck and neck with a 4060. Even though Blackwell looks like a disaster on laptops, how is AMD going to increase the performance of Medusa's iGPU to get to the point where it's competing with NVIDIA laptops at similar price points, like probably 5070 Ti or so? So before this person wrote the question, you didn't know I was going to leak that it's going to have 20% more compute units, 50% more bandwidth at least. I mean, 50% bigger bus, maybe the RAM's faster too. Um, and I think that's more than enough if it launches first half of next year, because the
Mhm.
5090 is actually a lot faster than the laptop 4090, and the 5080 is a bit faster than laptop 4080. But below that, I guess below the laptop 5070 Ti, right? It's not much better. I mean, from what I'm seeing here, the 5070 laptop edition is barely faster than the 4070. And if that's the case, I mean, I know that Medusa Halo may only be, let's say it's even just 30% faster, although I think it'll be more. Isn't that enough? I mean, if NVIDIA is only
Uh,
15% faster, they just went from
there-
competing with the 5060 now to in the future
mhm.
beating the 5070 in a year. I think it's enough.
That's it's absolutely possible. I mean, as we've seen that Blackwell 5070 is not going to be able to pull more wattage.
Mhm.
And since the chip is not going to be more efficient, I don't think we're getting much more than like 10% more performance. I can't see where it's coming from, because, the 40,000 series was like they had a voltage limit that like the GPUs did not perform better once they hit 100 watts. And I don't know if they're going to change this for Blackwell. So if they're not, then we are not going to see a significant boost in performance, if at all. I did not see any numbers. Do you have any numbers, performance of the 40, 50, 50, 70 laptop, or
No, I've
no? They're,
just, what I base it on is I believe the specs are literally the same between the
yeah.
5070 and the 4070. Obviously, it's now Blackwell, but same queue to core count, same memory bus, same L2 cache, even, I think. And so the only thing that's improving is GDDR7, but it's not pulling more power. And I'm just being honest here. The 5090 went from a 384-bit bus to 512 with GDDR7. It has double the bandwidth almost than the 4090, and it's like 30% faster. So if all they're and the same with the
Hmm.
5080, pretty much across the board here. So if all they're doing is increasing bandwidth, I know it was probably memory starved, so there will be games where it will make a big difference, but I can't see it being more than 20% faster, and it wouldn't surprise me
Hmm.
if it's 10
Yeah.
or 15.
Yeah, sure. Especially for the 5070 Ti's, I don't think we're going to see much more than that, too.
Yeah, and I'm just like looking here, like I've been writing down like a little chart. Like right now, what AMD is able to compete with is, let's see, that'd be 4060 to kind of 4070, but I assume that would be the same performance as a 5060.
Again, we have to factor in that it's CPU and GPU
Mhm.
with the same wattage. It's more effective. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm just doing the math here. It's just funny because like if you look at where AMD used to compete in the product stack, like Rembrandt kind of competed with the 1650 Max Q back a few years ago. Now we have Strix Point with 16 compute units competing with a 3050 Max Q. The
Mhm.
cheapest Strix Halo competing with a normal 3050. They got the 4050 with the 385, the 4060 competing
Mhm.
with the top Strix Halo. And so I think what we're going to look at is AMD is going to have 16 compute unit Medusa point, probably, not competing with the 4050, but certainly competing with any 3050 models around. Whereas you have Medusa Halo scaling all the way up to 5070 this gen, or maybe even 5070 Ti.
Mhm.
And it's just interesting to think like, yeah, we're going to get to a point where AMD has uh, several IO dies, which is funny actually, since these all share the same CPU chiplets. You have
Mhm.
the Medusa Point 16 compute unit, and then I assume there's going to be a 32 compute unit 256, and then a 48 compute unit 384. They have three different IO dies that I'm aware of now with Zen 6 being paired with different chiplets. This is, I think, just their answer to the lineup is they can compete all the way up to the
Abso-
5070 Ti,
Yep.
ignore the 5080 and 5090. This is their mobile graphics cards. I think this is
Yep.
what they're going to do.
Yeah, as you said before, there's basically no Radeon mobile laptops around. Like you can count them on one hand, and I think that's a smart way to actually enter the market and like getting shares in the laptop GPU market, like by doing it that way. I think they are going to be successful with that.
I think much more successful than trying to get people to buy a 9060M or
Yeah,
something. I
absolutely.
think so.
Yep.
Samuel writes in and says, "Hi, Tom and Manuel. I'd like to know whether either of you think the APUs will eventually replace mobile dedicated GPUs and maybe even desktop. If not, entry level. Absolutely entry.
Absolutely,
Uh,
yes.
but but also mid range and possibly high end. Could there be any benefit with a possibility or not? Um, I think over time they will mostly replace the mid range laptop ones too. I do think you'll see like potato masher laptops that pair like Zen 3 with a 5060 and try to sell you that for $900 or something. Like, I think you might get that every now and then, but otherwise, I think, there's always going to be high end laptops. Everyone's always going to want some crazy powerful desktop chip in a laptop. But I think we're going to get to the point where 75% of laptops don't have a dedicated card eventually.
Yeah, I
If that's
mean,
not already true, I mean.
yeah, I mean, we've seen the death of the Nvidia entry level GPUs. Like you said, the MX series died like 2 or 3 years ago. They're not doing that anymore because it was swallowed by integrated graphics. You don't need an MX card anymore. And I think that's going to happen with the 4050 series at least very soon, or the 5050 series. I mean, they don't even produce desktop 50 cards anymore. I
They're
think
still selling 3050s. Yeah.
yeah, but there's no 40. They said there will be a 4050, but they chose not to make one. I don't think there will be a 5050. So I
Well,
think
there is a 4050, right? But
no,
it's
not
just not
desktop,
highly produced. Oh, not desktop. Yes.
not
Sorry. Yeah.
desktop. Yeah, yeah, genau. Yeah, I don't think they're going to make a 5050 desktop as well. So they kind of given up that market, as it seems. I mean, just remember, like a few years ago, we had even below 50. We had 40s and 30,
Oh, yeah.
20 cards in the beginning in laptops and some
And then even
desktop
MX.
variants. Yeah, and MX. So they're kind of already given up that sector. That I think we're going to see the death of entry level GPUs both in laptops and desktops soon. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they're just not profitable to make anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, there's a lot of YouTube channels that seem to think these things are free. They're not. They actually cost like a lot of money to make. There's a reason it's hard to make any good graphics card below $200. I mean, what Intel launches Battlemage and what they're about to go bankrupt. Like the only way to do it is to not make money on them. And so like think of how much cheaper integrated graphics even on desktop are, where you don't even need to include the cooler, the RAM. It's just the iGPUs there. People can buy whatever cheap RAM they want. That's way less than the board and the size of the boxes for these graphics cards, you know.
Mm.
Like shipping it's so much cheaper. So I just think that's going to be on the way out. And it is because they can't make them anymore. Like the low end is now $300 because that's what it costs to make a low end card on 4nm or something. That's why it cost, because it does cost that much. But I will say, like, benefits to this, which is I think is an interesting question. I think it was like when I started the YouTube channel, I made this video where I was like, what would a world look like without dedicated cards? And I was like, it might actually be a lot nicer. I mean, all you're assuming they actually have what you want, my suspicion would be they would just have like two variants like of their desktop chips. Like here's the 9950X, here's a 9950X with an included 7900M, and then so on and so forth. You just buy the one you want, and then you just buy a motherboard. You buy a motherboard, an APU, RAM, you're done. You know, I think, and what would be cool is you get to choose how much RAM your graphics card has now.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I look at this with like at least a tear in my eye because I think that for many of us, like these entry level GPUs have been their entry to the PC gaming, like sector, and like I mean if you look at the Steam surveys, the Nvidia 50 series does they have there's more Nvidia 50 series cards around than all AMD cards combined. No, there's so many people are still using 50 card series. They have never been really popular, especially among enthusiasts, because usually they don't have good performance compared to the price. And so, but for many people, they were the cheapest options, and they still love those cards because they enabled them to play the games they wanted to play, and it was fine. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing that they are going to be replaced if there's good APUs that are reasonably priced, and you get rid of the VRAM problem. They're more effective, more efficient. Yeah. I mean, I also love desktop GPUs because just the haptics and pushing them in, and the card boxes and everything. I do like them, but at the end of the day, if you can get something cheaper, more effective, more efficient, yeah, why bother?
Something that I wonder as well with Zen 6 is I know the IO die, even on AM5, is going to be like 155 millimeters squared. And that's like 20%, 30% bigger than what it is right now with Zen 5's IO die. And once you're on these smaller nodes, compute units don't take up a lot of space. So that's what I wonder, like, so they made it 20 or 30% bigger. Maybe they just added a neural engine. I don't know. But I don't think I need one. But if they did add, even with the neural engine, I wonder if they could still do this. Like they have 2 compute units right now on desktop. Could they go with that extra space just from 2 to like 12 and then call it a day? I mean, because if you could afford to do that, then you could be, AMD could just argue, hey, look, we're not making a 9040, desktop card because all of our new iGPUs on desktop perform like a 3050. And there is no point, like if you want a $100 graphics card, AMD just gives it to you. And then that might be the start. And then that's when you would like wonder, like, then do they start working it up from there? And where does it end? Because the logical conclusion would be that I think that there's always going to be 90 class. There's always going to be at least one high-end AMD card. But is there only, instead of there being a lineup of like 10 graphics cards, is there going to be like 3 or 4? And they're going to be expensive. And are you going to require Threadripper to use it or something? Probably not Threadripper, but it does make me wonder where this would logically go. If it becomes more and more niche to use a graphics card and it's more and more you're a power user, would they start pushing you to have to get Threadripper or something?
Yeah, I think that's possible. Absolutely.
But not until like most of the market is gone, or that would be suicide. But I don't know. I think I think the last thing I'd add to this, and is anyone who thinks this would kill Nvidia, I already leaked they're basically making the same thing as Medusa. They've got like an APU family with ARM cores, and that chiplet merges with a GPU. Like they've already Project Digits, I'm told, is one part of this APU laptop family. So I don't think this is going to completely catch Nvidia off guard. In fact, who knows? Maybe they'll be the first one to even do it. I mean, Nvidia's not often surprised by things.
Yeah, I was baffled that Nvidia did not release an APU yet. I think I don't know how long it takes to develop that stuff, but I would suggest that with the release of the Steam Deck, they at least should have started developing something, because they must have noticed that there's a market for this, and the market is quite big actually. And they until now they just left the field for AMD and Intel. And I was surprised that it took them so long actually to do that, to compete in that market, you know.
Yeah, and so far Project Digits, I mean, I thought it looked really cool, but so far it sounds like it uses some proprietary like Ubuntu, and it doesn't use support Windows with drivers. So it seems very niche and like haphazardly thrown together. And I can't help but see that. And then I'm also hearing that they want to launch NVIDIA APUs late this year, early next year, is what I was told. But it's been quiet about them with my sources for a few months. And I've heard about driver issues. There's just a part of me that wonders if like Project Digits is like a part of something that they intended to be something else that isn't going well. But I guess we'll see, because I still think that there's a lot of concern that if they launch an NVIDIA laptop, that if the drivers with ARM aren't perfect, that it's going to be really bad for the brand image. So I don't know. I'm curious what happens with that too. I could see it going either way, but it seems like common sense to me that they would do this eventually. I don't know if there's anything else you really want to talk about here. I actually think this might be a good note to end on.
Well, if you're fine, if you don't have any questions.
No, I think we're good.
Anything you want to talk about?
I think we could talk about like Zen 6 desktop, but it's like, I feel like I've already talked about that. And I think it would all be speculation. I mean, I guess I'll just ask, are you excited that Zen 6 is 24 cores? I guess that might be one question I have for you.
Yeah, well, to be honest, since I'm using AM5 in my desktop, and you just confirmed a few days ago, I think, that it's Zen 6 desktop CPUs will be supporting AM5. I'm quite excited about that, to finally get rid of my 8-core AM5 CPU, for that matter.
Did you buy it with that in mind? Did you expect AMD would go to 24 or 32 cores on AM5?
Well, I bought it with the expectation in mind that I will be able to upgrade it years from when I invested in AM5. Like, I trusted AMD that I would be able to upgrade my CPU 2 or 3 times at least to a much better CPU. That's why I actually invested in AM5. And so, yeah, sounds great actually.
I guess the final question I've had for that though is, are you going to get the 24 core? Or are you going to get the 12 core with Vcache?
Well, that depends. I mean, I'm actually using, I'm using my desktop PC for both gaming and workloads, like rendering videos, doing 3D stuff with Blender. So I'm actually making use of both worlds. So there's a big chance that at the end of AM5, I want to use the best possible CPU that I can use.
So this was intentional. You started with 8 cores to save money, knowing eventually you'd want a huge upgrade.
Yeah, I went with 8 cores because I thought that would be okay for what I use for gaming and for rendering, and I did not see the need to get the 7950 or so. And my intention was like just start with a reasonable 7700X, and then at the end of the life of the AM5 platform, just use the best CPU that you can get for this. So to make the most out of the motherboard and the RAM I bought,
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people that do that as well. So I was really excited when I saw that it was extra confirmed that it's 24 cores. because I know there's a lot of people that have been complaining about 16 cores,
Mhm.
But all right, I think that's a good place to end it on, though. So I really want to thank you for coming on, Manuel, once
Yeah, thank
again.
you for having me.
Please tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, yeah. To be honest, I only have my YouTube channel because I don't have the extra time to invest in Instagram or stuff like that. So at this point, it's just YouTube without any extras.
Okay, so there will be a link in the description where everybody can find you, and also, of course, below you can find our sponsors to support. You can, make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Law Said YouTube channel and ring the bell button as well, and try to join the Patreon. If you do join the Patreon, there's extra content. I think a new die shrink should be coming out this week as well, and you'll get the ability to ask us like the one you see on screen today. Questions. But for everybody else, again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And yeah, have a good week, everybody. It is going to be a busy one. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the about/support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Bedlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, MJB1, GZ Ziggy, Toka, SNES Chalmers, Jerem Ferriero, Velcom Alev, Jensen Wang, Gregory Sacker, Sarcastro, Strix, Kid Press AI Blocks, Hal Booma, Evan Dingle, Shredbird, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, The Boss Haas, Chrysantine, Jonathan, Franco Frederic, Jake Dude 23, Nithra Zink, Jake Martin, Slicky, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Gamers Unite, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cake, Stephen Coates, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy Eichert, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Cole Addick, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Winwing, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Winstar, Corey Leonard, James I, Raider, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, JSMH, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Justin Bussell, Austin Haggerty, Dofit, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jensen Ankima, Joseph Kelly, Slushball, Himsick Gung, Tails 2299, Sisyphos 7771, Brian Wright, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Jeffrey Gentleman, Alex Vega, Dr. J Mab, Freedy, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal Joe, Albergun, Keekum, Solarized 80, Thalo 215, Sprutnik, Brian P, Hoodat 42, Cornster 671, Pinta Winter, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Penguin, Zlov AI, Hugo, Ander Kivi, Porcelain Oats, Curry King 3, Nixus Mania, Sakosha, State Farm Snake, Rye Hill Chi Bowls, 37X73, Armand, Vacatura, Calon, Rachel, Jonathan Harris, Smash, Axley, and Angel of Cake. And of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.